If you have ever seen a McLaren pull up outside a restaurant and thought, I could afford that if I really wanted to, this video is going to change how you think about that sentence, because the sticker price is genuinely the smallest number on the entire ownership spreadsheet. Today we are pulling apart the real economics of owning a McLaren, from the moment you sign the paperwork to the moment you sell it 5 years later. And by the end of this video, you will understand why so many owners describe their supercar as a second mortgage with exhaust note. Stick around, because the numbers in the middle of this video are the ones dealerships never put in the brochure. Let's start with the entry point, because McLaren's own lineup is a lesson in how quickly zeros pile up. The current GTS, the brand's grand tourer aimed at owners who actually want to drive their car on real roads, starts at roughly $230,000 before a single option is added. Step up to the Artura, McLaren's plug-in hybrid supercar with a twin-turbo V6 and electric assist, producing a combined output well over 600 horsepower, and you are looking at a starting price in the mid-200,000s. The 750S, which is the purer, track-focused expression of what McLaren does best, starts north of $350,000 before destination charges, and that is before you even glance at the options list. And if you want to go all the way to the top of the current range, the hybrid hypercar McLaren calls the W1 starts at approximately $2.1 million, limited to fewer than 400 units worldwide. So depending on where you enter the McLaren world, you could be financing anywhere from $250,000 to over $2 million, and that spread alone tells you this is not a one-size-fits-all conversation. Now here is the detail almost nobody explains properly, and it is the single biggest factor separating what a McLaren costs on paper from what it costs in real life. Very few McLarens ever leave the factory in base configuration. Most buyers option their car up, and those options typically add 15 to 30% on top of the starting price. Carbon fiber packages, forged wheels, upgraded interiors, McLaren special operations finishes, bespoke paint, telemetry systems, track packages, all of it adds up fast, and in some cases a heavily spec'd car can run 30 to 50% above the number you saw in the advertisement. So when someone tells you a McLaren starts at $230,000, what they actually mean is that a McLaren starts at $230,000 if you are willing to walk out of the dealership with the plainest, most option-free version on the lot, and almost nobody does that. Once you own the car, the next layer of the economics kicks in immediately, and this is where the ownership experience starts to diverge sharply from anything you have budgeted for with a conventional luxury vehicle. Routine annual servicing on a McLaren typically runs somewhere between $1,500 and $4,000, depending on the model and whether you use an authorized dealer or an independent exotic car specialist. That covers your basic oil, filters, fluids, and multi-point inspection, but it assumes nothing goes wrong, and with a car engineered around a carbon fiber tub, twin-turbo engines, and hydraulic suspension systems, something eventually does go wrong. Brake pads and rotors on a performance car like this can run around $5,000 when they need replacing, typically every 15 to 20,000 miles depending on how the car is driven. A full set of performance tires can run $2,000 to $4,000, and if you are actually using the car the way McLaren built it to be used, you are not getting anywhere near the tire life of a family sedan. Insurance is the next number that catches new owners off guard, and it deserves its own conversation because it scales differently than people expect. On a car valued around $200,000, annual comprehensive insurance typically runs between $5,000 and $10,000, which works out to roughly 2.5% to 5% of the vehicle's value every single year, compared to something closer to 1% to 2% for a conventional luxury car. Push up into Ultimate Series territory, cars like the Senna, and annual insurance premiums can run $10,000 to $16,000, because these are cars insurers view as both high value and high risk. Most serious owners move away from a standard auto policy and toward what is called agreed value coverage, arranged through specialists who deal specifically in exotic and collector vehicles. The difference matters enormously, because a standard policy pays out actual cash value after depreciation in a total loss, while agreed value coverage guarantees the full insured amount regardless of what the market did in the meantime. If you are financing or have real money invested in a car like this, agreed value coverage is not optional. It is the only coverage that actually protects what you paid. Then there is the warranty question, which is where a lot of the horror stories you have heard online actually come from. McLaren's factory warranty typically runs 3 to 5 years depending on the model, and once that coverage lapses, owners are strongly encouraged to buy an extended warranty, often running $4,000 to $6,000 annually, because without it, a single electronic fault or a component failure outside of warranty can produce a repair bill running into the tens of thousands of dollars. Multiple long-term McLaren owners who track their actual annual spending report total yearly costs, once you combine warranty renewal, scheduled service, and the miscellaneous items that inevitably come up, landing somewhere between $9,000 and $12,000 a year, and that is before you factor in tires, insurance, or storage. Speaking of storage, this is a cost category most first-time buyers never think to budget for at all. Secure, climate-controlled indoor parking for a car at this price point can run $300 to $600 a month in a major metropolitan area, and that is before you add paint protection film, which can run anywhere from $2,000 to $7,000 for full front coverage, or ceramic coating, which typically adds another $1,000 to $2,500. None of this is technically mandatory, but if you have just spent $250,000 or more on a car, the idea of parking it outside uncovered and unprotected defeats the purpose of owning it in the first place, so in practice, these become real, recurring costs of responsible ownership. Now let's talk about the number that actually determines whether owning a McLaren is a smart financial decision or an expensive mistake, and that number is depreciation. This is the part of the conversation dealerships genuinely do not want to have with you, because it is the biggest single cost of ownership by far, larger than insurance, larger than maintenance, larger than everything else combined. Standard series McLarens, the volume production models like the 750S and the GTS, can lose 25 to 35% of their value in the first year alone, which on a $350,000 car is well over $100,000 evaporating before you have put 5,000 miles on the odometer. Over a 5-year holding period, a well-maintained McLaren from the standard lineup might retain somewhere between 65 and 85% of its purchase price. But that range is doing a lot of work, because where you land in it depends heavily on the model, the specification, the mileage, and market conditions at the time you sell. Here is where the story gets genuinely interesting, though, and it is the piece that separates McLaren from almost every other luxury car brand on the planet. The Ultimate Series cars, models like the P1, the Senna, and the Speedtail, do not follow this depreciation curve at all, because these cars are built in extremely limited numbers, sometimes only a few hundred units worldwide, and because they represent McLaren at its most technically extreme, they have historically appreciated in value well beyond their original retail price. A McLaren P1 that carried a retail price of $1.35 million now regularly changes hands well above that figure, and the newer W1, limited to fewer than 400 units and already fully allocated to buyers before its release, is widely expected to follow the same trajectory. So the honest answer to whether a McLaren is a good investment depends entirely on which McLaren you are talking about. Buy a standard series car, and you should think of it purely as a depreciating asset you pay for the privilege of driving. Buy into the Ultimate Series, assuming you can even get an allocation, and you are potentially holding an asset that behaves more like a piece of fine art than a car. So what does the full financial picture actually look like when you add every layer together? For a standard series McLaren purchased around the $200,000 to $350,000 range, a realistic annual cost of ownership, combining depreciation, insurance, maintenance, warranty coverage, tires, and storage, lands somewhere in the $25,000 to $50,000 range per year once you average it out over a 5-year hold, with the heaviest hit landing in year 1, because of that steep initial depreciation curve. That is before financing costs if you are not paying cash, and before the incidental repairs that fall outside routine maintenance, which specialists typically recommend budgeting an additional $5,000 to $10,000 a year to cover. It is also worth touching on financing, because most McLaren buyers are not paying cash, and the math on a loan changes the picture further. Even with a healthy down payment, financing a $300,000 car over 60 months, at prevailing rates for exotic vehicle loans, adds thousands of dollars a year in interest alone, stacking directly on top of the depreciation the car is already experiencing during those same 5 years. That combination, a depreciating asset with an appreciating interest bill sitting on top of it, is exactly why financial advisors who work with high net worth clients almost universally recommend treating a supercar purchase as a cash decision rather than a financed one whenever possible, and why many dealerships now push extended terms specifically because they know the monthly payment looks more palatable than the true 5-year cost ever will. None of this means a McLaren is a bad decision, and I want to be clear about that, because the people who buy these cars are not making a spreadsheet error, they are making a lifestyle decision with their eyes open, and there is nothing wrong with that as long as the eyes really are open. What separates a McLaren owner who enjoys 5 years of an extraordinary driving experience from one who ends up in financial distress is almost never the purchase price. It is almost always the ongoing costs that were never budgeted for in the first place. The insurance renewal that arrived and was double what they expected, the out-of-warranty repair bill that landed at $40,000, the depreciation hit that only became real the day they tried to sell. If you are seriously considering stepping into McLaren ownership or into the supercar world more broadly, the smartest move you can make before you ever sign a purchase agreement is to build out the full 5-year cost picture, not just the monthly payment, and to talk to an insurance specialist who actually works with exotic vehicles rather than assuming your regular auto policy will cover you the way you think it will. That single conversation, had early, is worth more than almost any other piece of advice in this entire video. If this breakdown was useful, hit subscribe, because we go deep on the real numbers behind the lifestyles people love to show off but rarely explain honestly, and drop a comment letting me know which car you want the economics of next, because your requests genuinely shape what we cover here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.